Welcome to FFRF's Ask an Atheist for Thanksgiving Week 2017. This is our first pre-Thanksgiving show. I'm Dan Barker with Laurie Gaylor, and we're co-presidents of the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Today, we're going to ask, what do atheists do at Thanksgiving? How do you handle prayer at the Thanksgiving dinner table? And as a really special treat, we have a video that the well-known stand-up comedian Leanne Lord made for us this week. It's called Leanne Lord's 6 Things to Argue About During Thanksgiving Other Than Politics. It's really very funny. If you have a question for us today at any time during the show, you can post it as a comment here on Facebook, or you can send an email to askanatheist@ffrf.org.
So before we talk about Thanksgiving, Dan, you just came back from a rather historic trip on Freethought in Central America. You were in Honduras and Guatemala. Can you tell us something about that?
That was a lot of fun. I was invited by a group called Libre Pensamiento Honduras, which means Freethought Honduras. Do we have a picture of the group, the Honduran group that's there? They've a bunch of feminists and freethinkers and activists, and yeah, there they are, all excited about wanting to fight theocracy in their country. And you can see some of the organizers there in the middle, and I'm hiding in the middle of that group. It was really an exciting time because even though the country of Honduras is officially secular, the church has immense power in the country, and the evangelical church is catching up with the Catholic Church in Honduras and in many Central American countries. And the churches they can marshal the vote. And the politicians in the government know that the pastors and priests can marshal the vote. So there's a real problem mixing religion and government. But anyway, this group, Libre Pensamiento Honduras, they set up a huge media tour for me, including 4 national TV shows. And
now, what city were you in?
The city is the capital, Tegucigalpa, which is really fun. They say it is the most dangerous major airport in the world to land, and it was really fun landing there, and then everybody applauded once the plane landed. But
doesn't sound too fun, Dan, but
it was fun. If you're a pilot, it's a fun thing to do, to land your airplane in Tegucigalpa. That's the capital. And they set up a number of TV interviews for me. And let's watch one of them. This is called Hoy Mismo. And if you know Spanish at all, let's watch for about 30 seconds of this show, which was a very popular morning talk show in the country of Honduras.
Le damos la más bienvenida a otro invitado el día de hoy, Dan Barker, copresidente de la Fundación Libertad de la Religión. ¿Me equivoco? Dan,
está en Freedom from Religion Foundation, en los Estados Unidos.
Ok, perfecto. Aquí lo traducimos a nuestros televidentes, Fundación Libertad de la Religión. Para Dan, ¿qué significa los prejuicios?
Bueno, nuestro grupo Freedom from Religion somos casi todos ateos y agnósticos y humanistas seculares.
So even I, who do not speak much Spanish, caught most of that.
Yeah, our group is atheists, agnostics, secular humanists, and they were really excited because the freethinkers there told me this is the first time there's ever been national exposure to non-belief within that country. And there was another talk show that we're put on. Which do we have next, Bruce? Is this the one on Radio Global? Let's look at another clip. Honduras TV. This is where I was invited to debate a pastor. It was a 90-minute debate on live TV. A pastor who had been the minister of religion for the government. Even though it's a secular country, they have a minister of religion for the government.
Not too secular.
Well, yeah, because of what I said, there is a real entanglement of religion and government. But here's just a tiny bit of that morning talk show.
Buenos días.
Buenos días.
Bienvenido, Dan Barker.
Mi primera visita a su país bonito, gente muy amable.
Primera vez en Honduras.
En Honduras. And I was saying that was my first visit to Honduras. I really enjoyed it. And that fellow that was next to me there, I asked him, how can you respect this Bible that has this bloodthirsty God in it who committed genocide? And he went blah, 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 blah. But then I asked him, is genocide good? And he said on the air, well, genocide is partially good.
Which shows you the harm of religion, that anything goes, dogma goes above common sense, above people, above the law.
Yeah, so it was an interesting show. And then I also was invited to it was a national radio show that was televised on Facebook Live. It used to be TV. And this was a liberal host, and he's very popular because the liberals and the freethinkers are really angry at the government for many different reasons, not just the corruption, but the religion. And they had a coup a few years ago, so there's a lot of talk. So I was also invited to this radio or TV Globo to talk just for about 90 minutes.
En un Dios al ateísmo.
Bueno, muchos han hecho lo mismo, no solamente nosotros los pastores, y yo conozco personalmente más.
Asking me, why did you change from being a Christian pastor to an atheist? And I was saying, well, a lot of people have done the same thing, and I knew a lot of other ministers and priests who have left, in the Clergy Project, and they were really interested in my story. How can a pastor become an atheist? And it was like big news. It was also, I think, the fact that I was an American. It opened a lot of doors. Here's this an American from a national group, who's an author, and doing that allowed me to contact for these freethinkers then to make contact in the media. And I was able to interview a newspaper editor. His name was Johnny Lagos, who's the editor and owner of a monthly newspaper called El Libertador, the Liberator. And he, do we have a picture of Johnny? Yeah, there he is. Johnny Lagos there. He's a real hero in the country because there was an assassination attempt on his life. And Johnny Lagos, they didn't recognize him because he was dressed casually and he hadn't shaved. They didn't realize he was the editor, so they walked right past him. His shirt basically saved his life, he said. But he said there during our interview that integrity is not cheap. The government actually tried to buy 3 months of his newspaper so they could control the election, and he said no. They offered him tens of thousands of dollars to do that.
But then what did he offer? You told me when you came back that he made an offer to the freethinkers of Honduras.
When I was doing the interview, the other freethinkers were there with me. They were all excited to be talking to this famous hero, Johnny Lagos. And then he turned to them and he said, how about if you guys write me a monthly op-ed or a monthly article about secularism and free thought in the country? And they said, of course we would like to. So there was a good connection that was made there.
And so then you were in Guatemala?
Well, there was, I think we have pictures of a few more media interviews. Yeah, this is Channel 24, which is another popular morning talk show. And I just breezed right into this place. And look at this set they have here. Is there a close-up of the set? There I am with my arms across in Channel 24 in the morning. And here we are with these two young women on the morning talk show.
And I take it that they are using women to sell media by the way that one of them was dressed, but you said she was a very good journalist.
Well, actually they were both very articulate. They were both believers, but they were asking sensible questions, and they wanted to talk. This was at least 30 minutes of a morning talk show. They called, what is it called on there? I forget the name of the show, but it's on Channel 24, so that was good.
And anything else there?
Are there any more? Well, here's another shot of the Hoy Mismo program that aired that same day. And then also this guy here, he's called Chano is his nickname. This is kind of like the Fox News of Honduras. He's a right-winger, strong Catholic. And he even asked me during the interview, so what do you think of the Virgin Mary? Like it was, and I said, well,
I think she was abused.
Well, she was probably like 14 or whatever. But anyway, it was really exciting time to do all the media and then to do some sightseeing in the Honduras. And then I got on a plane in Tegucigalpa and flew to Guatemala City to meet with a bunch of the local humanists there. And these are just some wonderful, young, active, professional freethinkers that are in the country of Honduras. There on the left is Carlos Mendoza. He's the old guy of the group. He's 45. And Carlos Mendoza, and then on my left, on the right there, is David Pineda, who's the president of the Guatemala Humanists. And next to him is a psychologist who gave a talk. On the other side is the founder, the guy in the black, Oscar Pineda. They're not related, but their last name's the same.
And is the situation in Guatemala the same? Is it got a church state, or is it a...
It's the same. It's a secular country that has a lot of problems
Dominated
with
by...
religion. In fact, Oscar there on the left had testified before the government opposing a bill that was introduced to require mandatory Bible teaching in the elementary schools. And for now, it looks like that bill has been tabled.
Well, that's
they're
very good.
Very exciting. So Freethought is alive and well in Central America.
Well, kudos to our brothers and sisters there in Central America for their brave work.
Yeah.
And now let's turn to the topic of the week, which is Thanksgiving. And tell us about this treat we have.
Well, okay, so this is Thanksgiving week, and I was reading a blog by Leanne Lord. Leanne Lord is this well-known, many of you have seen her, well-known stand-up comic from New York City. She's been on a lot of TV shows. She does a lot of the fair circuits, and she's written books. She wrote a book called Real Women Do It Standing Up as a stand-up comic. And I told her, that was a wonderful blog you did about 6 things you can argue about during Thanksgiving dinner that are not about politics. So she graciously recorded a video for us reading that very blog.
Hi everybody, this is Leanne Lord, the creator of VeryFunnyLady.com. Some of you might know me as a stand-up comedian, author, keynote speaker, and Star Talk Radio with Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson. Well, the holidays are here, and that means some of you might be spending a lot of time with family, with people that you love and can marginally tolerate. And just because you have shared DNA, that doesn't mean that you have shared political opinions. So that can lead to some heated arguments about politics, about who's right and who's wrong. Well, you're right and they're wrong, but if you want to do something a little different this year, I have a list of 6 things that you can argue about instead of politics. The first is money. When people come over to the house for dinner, be sure to collect a cover charge at the door from everybody who didn't bring a dish. And make it easy. Use a square. Also, ask to borrow money from someone you've already borrowed from but have yet to pay back. Make no mention of the previous monies owed. The second thing you can fight about is weight. If someone's gained weight since last year, mention it as dinner is being served. If someone has lost weight and they look great, say nothing. The third thing that you can fight about is love. If someone is single, be sure to ask when they're getting married. If someone is married, be shocked it's lasted this long. If someone's divorced, ask lots of questions about their ex. Be sure to mention how much you like and miss them, and wonder aloud whether or not they should have been invited to dinner. The fourth thing to argue about? Sex and gender. If you're gay, go on ahead and out a heterosexual family member. Be sure to mock their chosen lifestyle and say there was always something a little different about them and that you'll pray for them. Well, for bonus points, question the gender identity of the turkey. The fifth thing to argue about? Religion. When it's time to say grace, turn it into a religious filibuster. Like, just keep talking. Use any and all prayers except the ones from the religion that your family follows. If you're an atheist, be sure to transition with, oh, here's another funny one. You'll know you've done well when someone has to reheat the gravy. The sixth thing to argue about? Tradition. Like, instead of asking the oldest family member, ask the youngest family member to carve the turkey, no matter how young they are. Like, what's more exciting than a knife-wielding toddler? Or you can ask the vegetarian to do it. Every family has one. They're usually the ones skulking and sulking around the salad. If all else fails, go on ahead and argue about politics. But really do it. Like, make sure you talk about somebody's mama, like even if you have the same one. You know, just let it descend into chaos, like an all-out food fight. And then at the end of it, come together as a family and help clean up. Because the person who would normally do it has probably been deported. Happy holidays.
Very funny.
I want to go to her house for Thanksgiving.
That's very sweet of her to record that quickly on the fly just for this show. So thank you, Leanne Lord.
And by the way, Leanne is offering a special Cyber Monday sale of her book, Real Women Do It, Standing Up. Go to her website, veryfunnylady.com, and look for that Cyber Monday sale. And you can get a signed autographed copy of her new book, Real Women Do It, Standing Up.
Well, we'll definitely have to do that. Well, thank you, Leanne. Now, I think that since the topic is Thanksgiving, we're actually going to take some true questions about the dilemmas that we non-believers do face at Thanksgiving. She touched on that a little bit. And I think you've got a question, don't
Well,
you?
let me see if we have questions. I'm reminded of an article that someone wrote in Freethought today. One of our members from Minnesota, they're atheists, and everybody knows it, but Grandma invited them to a Thanksgiving dinner. I think you remember this article. And so then Grandma said, now who wants to say grace for the meal? And everybody was quiet. And then finally the teenage boy said, I'll say grace. And so they bowed their heads, and the parents were wondering, what's he going to say? He doesn't believe in God. And he said, I would like to give thanks to all the farmers who grew the food that we're going to eat today. And I would like to give thanks for all the truckers who got it to the stores, and to the stores who got it all arrayed for us there. And I would like to thank Grandma for all the hours she spent cooking this meal, this wonderful meal. And he hesitated, and then he said, and then there's those chickens.
And then I believe that the grandparents said, thank you so much. I
Yeah,
think
that's enough. She said, that's enough. And they went ahead. Because you know what he was doing? He was giving thanks where thanks is due to real human beings, giving thanks where it really is due to be. So let me see if I can figure out how to work this thing.
So I think we have some questions about
Okay, here's a
Thanksgiving.
question. Okay, Kisa, K-I-S-A, her question is, as an atheist, it always makes me uncomfortable during the prayer. I feel like I'm required to bow my head just so I don't make anyone else feel uncomfortable. What do you recommend atheists should do to not offend or be offended by their family during the pre-dinner prayer?
So we will also take your advice. People who are watching right now can call in comments and advice. Every circumstance is different, and it really depends on what you know about the people. Maybe you're just a guest in some stranger's house. If it's your family and they know you're an atheist, you could maybe tell them ahead of time, you know that I'm not going to participate in the prayer. What do you advise, Dan?
Well, if the believers are bowing their head in prayer, they're not going to notice, or they shouldn't be noticing, that you're not, right? So you can just keep your eyes open the whole time. And that happens to me a lot. I play piano sometimes at religious weddings and religious events, and they have a prayer. I just sit there, and I notice there's two or three other people in the room also that are looking around that aren't bowing their head. So especially if it's their house, you don't want to interfere with their customs. You don't want to make them feel bad. If they believe in God and want to pray, who are we to interfere with that? It's only if they ask us to participate with them that that's the problem.
And I think there's another question on that, Dan.
Another question? So here's a question. My family often makes me lead the prayer before Thanksgiving each year. They say it's because I'm the youngest, but I think they simply find it amusing to make the atheist pray. Like this is going to somehow make me believe in God. This year, I plan to politely bow my head if I'm asked and say, accept His noodly magnificence into your heart, into your soul, and you shall forever be free. In the name of the pasta, and of the sauce, and of the holy meatballs, ramen.
So there we have somebody who's willing to stir up a little bit of discord there, but that's in using humor.
Yeah, but if that's
an idea.
If she's in the kind of family that is knowingly going to ask an atheist to say a prayer, then it's pretty open. I mean, it's a pretty open situation where they're, you know, what do they expect if they ask an atheist to say a prayer?
I wasn't criticizing that. I thought that was cute.
Yeah.
Some people might not be able to get away with that, but if you couldn't get away with that tongue-in-cheek, perhaps we could follow the little Minnesota boy. I think he was actually 10. You told the story. Just give thanks and don't mention the deity. And if you are long enough, they won't even notice.
Yeah, because you're giving thanks. And really a prayer, no matter where a prayer is offered, even before a city council meeting or before Congress, really the whole idea of a prayer is to solemnize the event. We're going to take a moment, take a breath, and who cares what's said? We're having this moment of something.
But if you're flowery enough and clever enough, you might be able to say something that seems prayerful enough that the people won't even notice.
Yeah.
And that might be the best thing to do. But maybe we'll get some more advice coming in. Any
so
other
let me see
Thanksgiving
here.
questions?
Okay. Sophia Elizabeth Archambault asks, if I said that correctly, how does an atheist create service and community in a culture where much of those activities are centered in the church?
Well, my goodness, there's so many secular agencies and services, including our public schools, who are always in need of tutors and helpers. There doesn't need to be a connection to a church in order to do good. And that's one of the points of Non-Belief Relief, which is the charity that the Freedom from Religion Foundation's executive board has created to raise funds for charity. But I mean, there are countless ways. Even Red Cross, it's got the cross in the name, is a secular charity, and you can give blood if you are healthy enough, and it has nothing to do with religion. There's so many ways to help people.
Well, she's asking about community too. I mean, if you live in a small town, maybe the church is the only real watering hole where people come together to, you know, what does an atheist?
Well, you can certainly do individual activism,
Yeah.
and pointing out you can give blood, you can be part of a public school tutoring program, you can call up the Rape Crisis Center or the Battered Women's Shelter or the food shelters and ask, how can I get involved? You can create your own community that way.
Or as an atheist, you can just get involved with the secular outreach group. Today on our radio show, Freethought Radio Show, we're going to be talking with Eva Quinones, who's with the Secular Humanists of Puerto Rico. And they and the atheists and a number of groups are...
Including Non-Belief Relief.
Non-Belief Relief, yeah, and we gave money to help with that effort. They're packaging and delivering food and water and emergency supplies to the communities in the mountains of Puerto Rico that were hit so hard by those two fierce hurricanes. And in that endeavor, there's a community that's created, and there's some wonderful pictures on their website. If you go to Secular Humanists of Puerto Rico, you can see them climbing up the hills and handing food to the people who, they don't ask them what their religion is. They're just there to be human beings helping other human beings.
And that should be the that should be the whole point. There shouldn't be some ulterior motive to convert people.
So other people. Okay, here's a question from Gary White. Is there any biblical scripture that says prayer before a meal is necessary? Doesn't God say that you shouldn't pray in front of others to begin with? Well, that's actually true. In the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew, is it Matthew 6? Matthew 5 or 6?
Matthew 6, 5, 6, or 5, yeah, I think that's right.
It's been so many years since my preacher days. There is that admonition about when you pray
in public.
Don't be like the hypocrites, but go into your closet and shut the door and pray to God, because God sees that, right? But maybe a private family dinner is a different thing. You're not really up in front of in the public.
Well, I think you're dissecting it too closely. I think what this individual is suggesting is that they show that Bible verse in advance to their family members and say, this is why I'm not going to participate. And I think that might work too.
And you know, maybe it comes from the Last Supper. The story of the Last Supper where Jesus broke the bread and had the wine, and then he had the Lord said the prayer, as oft as ye do this. So there was sort of a ceremonial aspect to that. So maybe you can find that basis in Scripture. But actually, there's nothing in the Bible about going to church, any of that. It just says assemble together, but nothing about any of that. So maybe a lot of these customs are more modern than what comes from the Bible.
Is there anything else about Thanksgiving there, Dan?
Let me see if there's anything else.
Oh, I
So
think there's
far, no more
questions
Thanksgiving
about Thanksgiving.
questions.
But if people who are participating in this want to make their own suggestions, and also those can be put up on Facebook after the show for others to view, your suggestions on how to cope with religious relatives, and it is a problem for many people who are really coerced into bowing their head. And okay, so is there anything else there?
Okay, Mason Lane has a suggestion. I was asked to lead prayer at a relative's house, and I had everyone hold hands and do an on the count of 3 and vibrate together. Everyone loved it.
Well, that's good.
We always do that with guests at our house. So would that work at our house? I don't know.
Well, we don't need to deal with this at our house. I'm doing Thanksgiving, and there will be no prayer, invocation. I am not a ritualistic person. About the only ritual that I approve of are birthday parties.
Yeah.
So we do not have to worry about that, and I think it's kind of embarrassing to put people on the spot.
To do something.
But this would be something that might work, that's cute, that's lighthearted, if you are put on the spot when you're dealing with religious relatives.
And there's enough conversation going on. There's enough jokes being told or stories being told or that. Or you could maybe sing a song or something, but you could do something to make it like an event in your own family way.
Or on the other hand, you could be a free thinker and just dig in, because this is really a festival about feasts and eating and being with your family. And we don't need to solemnize that. We don't need to adopt the trimmings of religion. We just need our turkey trimmings.
Do we have time to talk about the first Thanksgiving?
Well, sure.
Because there's this myth, if you go to school, that the first Thanksgiving was the Puritans got there and prepared this big meal, and they invited the savage Indians to come and sit with them to share this wonderful meal. But that's not what the first Thanksgiving was all about at all. And Governor Winthrop of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, he actually said a prayer giving thanks to God for clearing away the land so the city on a hill could be built by the real human beings. And he didn't know it at the time, but it was disease that cleared the land. It was the disease that preceded the colonists.
But when he said clear the land, he was talking about the death of Native Americans.
Yeah, because they found these villages that were empty and these fields that had been prepared, but nobody was there. And they were giving thanks to God for preparing the way. The actual first Thanksgiving, and the natives were already doing this for thousands of years before the Europeans arrived. The Native Americans were already having their
harvest
annual feasts and all that thing. We're more likely to invite the colonists to share with them, because without the Indians, those pilgrims would not have survived. Those Puritans would have died. In fact, that first year, wasn't it like 40 of the Mayflower died?
That's a huge number.
That first year. They were bumbling. They didn't know what they were doing. They needed the Native Americans. But there was some friction, and the Pequots needed to be dealt with. And so there was a huge genocide and a massacre. And the first actual Thanksgiving prayer was to thank God for this victory of the massacre of those Native Americans that were given. So really the first Thanksgiving was a Thanksgiving to genocide, really.
Well, and that, I hope that's a little bit grim. Hopefully people can turn Thanksgiving into just something that's for their family and more warm. But yep, we have to remember there's a big myth about Thanksgiving.
Well, the actual modern Thanksgiving goes back to the Revolutionary War times, when George Washington said we should give thanks for the victories. And then it happened in the end of November, and then in the 40s or so it switched to the fourth Thursday in November, more for commercial reasons than anything. So Thanksgiving,
I think Lincoln was in there somewhere.
Yeah,
in
Lincoln was
this narrative that he made something more formal.
So Thanksgiving has gone through a lot of permutations to get to where it is today. At times you just pig out and have a good time with your family.
So are there any other questions?
Well, let me see if there's any other questions here. No more questions?
Oh, I thought there were some questions about atheism versus agnosticism.
Well, I don't see that on here.
Well, so, there's some here. I can read it.
Oh, there's one on the screen?
I could read it for you, Dan. How many people are called atheist when they're really agnostic? Scientists will say that if there's ever proof for God, they will change their opinion. So doesn't that mean there has to be more there have to be more agnostics than atheists, and that's James Kirst. And so I'll give that one to you, Dan.
Well, we did talk about this on a previous show, that you can be both. You can be an atheist and an agnostic. In fact, most atheists say they are agnostics because they address totally different things. Atheism and theism are addressing the concept of what do you believe. Not what do you know, but what do you believe. Theism isn't knowledge, theism is a belief. But agnosticism and Gnosticism are addressing the question of what do you know. So you can say at the same time, I don't know if there's a God, therefore I'm an agnostic, but I don't believe there's a God, therefore I'm an atheist. You can be an atheistic agnostic. You can also be, and there's a few people that would say, I don't know if there's a God, but I believe there's a God. So you can be a theistic agnostic as well, like Blaise Pascal, the famous philosopher mathematician, said.
But now, Thomas Huxley coined the term agnostic, and he was a free thinker.
Yeah.
He just said, you cannot know, and he's right. These religious claims, you can't prove a negative. And so some people prefer the term agnostic. And I like to say, as always, whatever we call ourselves, atheist, agnostic, skeptic, secularist, we all disbelieve in the same gods. And we don't believe in fighting each other and having schisms like the religious people do. And I think there's another question.
Up on the screen.
And I'm going to read that one again. If you don't believe in the Bible or religion, but you believe in something that made earth and man, and I would point out woman, and call it God, what are you? I think there is possibly a higher power, but I don't know what that is. It's just so easy to call it God. And this is a question from, I forgot, Mildred. I didn't get that last name, but you saw it on the screen. And I would first answer this, and that, of course, if you believe there is some sort of a divine spark that began the world, I think you'd be called a deist. Some people are more of a pantheist if they sort of believe there's a nature, but there's something more behind that nature. And of course, the founders, many of the framers of our country, of the Constitution, of the Enlightenment, Voltaire, Diderot, these people were largely deists in the classical sense. And they believed in science and did not attribute afterlife and that a deity was watching them. And I think that would be considered a deist. What do you think,
I wonder what a deist would pray at the Thanksgiving dinner, you know. But yeah, deism versus theism. Theism is a belief in a personal God, somebody who talks and makes things and writes books and all that, answers prayers. Deism, on the other hand, is this impersonal, it's almost may the force be with you. Deism was the kind of God that the freethinkers had before Darwin, like Thomas Jefferson and Thomas Paine.
Thomas Paine.
Because they didn't really know, do we have a good scientific explanation for the origin of life? So they thought, and Thomas Paine even thought, well, this isn't a personal being. You just look at trees and look at the forests and look at the rivers, and that's kind of your God.
And I would also point out that Thomas Paine, very importantly, and most of these deists of the Enlightenment, repudiated the concept of revelation, revealed religion, and they did not believe in creeds, at most Unitarianism.
And then I would say that question that was just asked, scientists don't use the word belief in the way that religious people do. Very few scientists say, I believe in gravity, or I believe in the Big Bang. They would say, based upon the probabilities we are accepting right now as a fact that this happened, but we're open to changing our mind. But that's not the same as religious belief, which stands in place of knowledge. We have another question on...
I think a final question here, unless somebody else sends something.
Catherine Marciana Carnegie, -orth. But what, that's a long name to say. How do you write that on your applications?
Well, I have a long name, so...
Okay, Annie Laurie Gaylor is pretty long.
Good for Catherine.
Okay, so she asks, what do you think about the new National Bible Museum by Hobby Lobbies?
And that opens up a whole Pandora's box. And
yeah, we should probably do a whole show.
We will do a whole show on that, but let's talk a little bit about it. This is the family behind this, the man behind this is Mr. Green of Hobby Lobby. Hobby Lobby has those inferior craft stores, and they've had a lot of controversy. They're best known for the Hobby Lobby Supreme Court decision that the Supreme Court said, okay, an employer who's religious, who's in a tightly owned corporate office, can deny women employees contraception that they disapprove of. And it was a terrible decision. And they are a fundamentalist family, and they have actually they've written a curriculum for teaching Bibles in the schools, which the Freedom from Religion Foundation has fought and which did not get adopted in Oklahoma. But that curriculum was actually written by what they call the Museum of the Bible. They've created this other entity, and so it's multifaceted. And then they created this huge museum 2 blocks or 3 blocks from the Capitol. I think it's the most expensive museum
$500 million,
ever created, I mean, which is amazing in DC compared to all the Smithsonian. And we haven't seen it yet. It just opened this week, and we'll definitely probably be doing some kind of a video tour expose like we did with Ken Ham's Ark Park. But the news articles, objective news articles, have been pretty clear that it is not an academic at all museum. The perspective is proselytizing. There's a great deal of omission.
Well, I wonder if they have a display there about the genocidal, bloodthirsty God of the Bible that threatens pestilence. By the way, the Bible Museum is not really a product of Hobby Lobby. It's a product of the same family.
Right.
And the money that they got came from their Hobby Lobby fortune, but they're separate endeavors by the Green family.
So I guess this is the last thing that we need in Washington, D.C. More religion, more immediate access to Congress, more religious right, Christian right pressure of Congress, which is already dominated by the religious right. And it's very clear that they set this up to be a sentry to have access to Congress, to promote this myth that our country is founded on a God and that we're a Christian nation. It's all the usual myths that we've been fighting. And of course, we have a secular constitution. We were the first country to be founded that separated religion from government. You can be a Christian or you can be a non-Christian. It doesn't matter to citizenship, but that's not what Hobby Lobby wants. That's not what Mr. Green wants.
I also read that there is some serious controversy over the Dead Sea Scrolls. That museum has some fragments of the Dead Sea Scrolls, which is a pretty amazing thing to have. However, many or most scholars are questioning that because there's this huge submarket of fake Dead Sea Scrolls that are going around, because there's a lot of money to be made by finding these fragments of them. And we'd have to look more into that story, but it's highly likely that those fragments of the Dead Sea Scrolls may not actually be Dead Sea Scrolls.
Well, what's new, we have a bumper sticker that said religion, the original alternate facts, the original fake news. So there's going to be a lot of fake news at this Bible Museum in D.C.
Yeah.
So I think that's our show.
There's no more questions here, Lauren?
We want to wish you a very warm Thanksgiving from the Freedom from Religion Foundation. And we would encourage you to share your anecdotes and your advice on Facebook for others to read today and tomorrow about what to deal with religion at Thanksgiving and being asked to pray at the table and so on. And we'll all advice is welcome.
So tune in next week, Wednesday at 12 noon Central, for our next FFRF Ask an Atheist Facebook Live. We'll see you then.
Thank you.